Hello and welcome to the 2021 Resistance and Resilience Benefit for the ACLU of Kentucky's Reproductive Freedom Project. My name is Amber Duke. I'm Deputy Director of the ACLU of Kentucky, and I'm proud to host this year's event. We had hoped to gather in person for this year's benefit, but the ongoing COVID crisis in Kentucky forced us to pivot to a virtual format. We look forward to when we can gather together in person again safely. As we gather, we find ourselves at a critical juncture for reproductive freedom. Just a few weeks ago, the United States Supreme Court allowed Texas's radical 6-week abortion ban to take effect, leading to devastation and chaos. Politicians across the country, including right here in Kentucky, have vowed to follow Texas's lead. If you need evidence of how desperate some are to turn back the clock, look no further than Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Our attorneys were at the U.S. Supreme Court this month trying to stop him from reviving an abortion case we've already won twice. Throughout this program, you will learn more about how we're using all the tools at our disposal to protect this essential care. As we wade through this climate of hostile politics and unreliable courts, your support and engagement is more important than ever. Jackie McGranahan. He is the ACLU of Kentucky's policy strategist for reproductive freedom. She did some incredible work in the General Assembly this year, ensuring the rights of pregnant, incarcerated Kentuckians. Her efforts to champion a bill led to the unanimous passage of legislation in the Kentucky House and the Kentucky Senate that was signed into law this summer. Jackie is going to join us to talk about another incredible initiative she's working on, the Breaking Barriers Council. The council is expanding the conversation around reproductive freedom in Kentucky to encompass all aspects of maternal health. Their goal is to ensure that people not only have the legal right, but also equitable access to resources to make the best decisions for themselves, whether those decisions are around adoption, continuing a pregnancy, or seeking abortion care. The council is made up of Black women who have been directly impacted by the issues that they're working on. They have experience with pregnancy and parenting. They are birth workers, doulas, therapists, who are all working on a unified strategy to address Kentucky's maternal health crisis as well as parental leave.
Women are the most disrespected people, and Black women are very disrespected. It puts us in a position to where we do not trust.
If I wanted to sit and talk about the barriers, we'd be sitting here all night.
We can't do the work alone in our little pockets. We have to build as a community to make change. And the reality is that along with community movement, there has to be policy change as well.
When we're talking about missions like reproductive justice, I think it's really important to have the people that it centers to be at the forefront of that. And that's across all spectrums, including everybody, no matter how they identify.
I don't want to wait for the next white man to have to tell me how to work his system. I think that's why it's important for breaking barriers, not only for our birthing people, so that non-birthing people can see the ignorance in our society and be like, yo, this does not make sense. Why have we been doing this to our women and our children?
At Breaking Barriers, we strive to provide accessible education and awareness.
Breaking Barriers is a group of women who want to see justice for other women.
We brought midwives, doulas, attorneys, folks in many different areas of reproductive rights work. We wanted to have a more inclusive conversation around reproductive freedom, and it's not just abortion. We meet monthly, sometimes weekly, to find solutions for the maternal mortality crisis in Kentucky. We have events to create awareness, to educate the public on what's happening in the community.
Jackie genuinely cares about what we want to talk about, what matters to us in our community.
It's literally like having that auntie or that mom that is going to help guide you, but also listen to your voice.
we are supporting a number of bills in the General Assembly. And the Democratic Women's Caucus is spearheading an array of bills targeting maternal mortality and the crisis in Kentucky. And 2 years ago, that wasn't a reality. So we know that we're having a positive effect on what's happening, and we're changing the conversation in the General Assembly.
I think a big part of the Breaking Barriers Council is also to continue to build networks across the community.
Being able to, even though with COVID, virtually have really good conversations with the community, and just watching light bulbs go off and people really kind of breaking those barriers, literally. Like, you can see the walls start to fall.
Breaking barriers is valuable. It's very valuable.
It's an incline steep right now with representation for our communities, providing the support that they need. Our white allies that we have to support us through the work that we do, everything's needed, everybody's needed.
I have a fairly soft voice, but I know how to make noise, and I feel like everyone on our council is good at making noise in different ways, and so we want the politicians to hear and pay attention to what's going on in all communities and make real change.
I'm excited to introduce an ACLU of Kentucky board member who is passionate about making sure Black, brown, and young Kentuckians have access to reproductive health care. Tatiana Wells was born in Detroit, Michigan, raised in Louisville, Kentucky. She's a poet, author, social justice advocate, and spoken word artist. She's also the founder of Honey Tree Publishing. Please enjoy this special performance from Tatiana Wells.
When hip-hop met poetry, an urban love story. Routine doctor visits. Although I believed in myself, as I got further along in the pregnancy, I realized that many others did not. This cognizance was mostly visible during routine doctor appointments. After several visits, we quickly noticed that many of the nurses and doctors in the office didn't treat us as nicely and fairly in comparison to other pregnant women who were either white, married, or had top-of-the-line health insurance. I was a Black, unmarried, pregnant teenager with government-funded health insurance. Whether I was standing in the line to apply for and accept federal assistance for low-income pregnant women or waiting to be seen by the baby doctor, I could feel the stares of the white office staff who checked me in with stony faces that lacked any sign of compassion. Their prejudiced stare said everything their lips wouldn't. It was subliminal, and between the lines of their monotone voices and scripted answers as they looked down at my belly with judgment, I was just another pregnant teen in their eyes and locked in their minds as one of those kind of girls. I was nothing to them. It was evident by the way they treated us that the healthcare industry was yet another unjust system. It was a painful reality to face. If only I could tell them that I was an honor roll student who planned the pregnancy with my boyfriend at the time, but they wouldn't care even if I bothered. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs to anyone who would listen to my truth. However, in reality, even though it was a planned pregnancy, I knew deep down inside it wasn't the best decision. It was just the only option that Rashad and I could think of to keep us together. Mother's intuition. May 18th. I felt a weight in my stomach that I hadn't felt before. That morning, after going into the bathroom and noticing spotting, I told Mama and she immediately called the doctor's office. To make sure everything was okay, Mama spoke with the on-call nurse to schedule an ultrasound. The woman on the phone was the same nurse from our routine appointments who we previously had problems with. The nurse spoke lacking any sign of compassion or empathy as usual. Well, she has been coming here a lot lately and has an appointment scheduled for later this evening, replied the nurse. Maybe you all should just wait to come in. Mama's tone became blunt as she said, she needs to be seen this morning and we just want to make sure the baby is fine. Put her on the speakerphone, I whispered. Annoyed by the nurse, I want to hear. I was tired of this woman and how she always disregarded me and my baby. She didn't seem to have a compassionate bone in her body. I was proved right when the nurse said that famous line that all expecting mothers hate to hear when they're worried about their unborn child. She needs to just try to get some rest. Try to get some rest, I repeated in my regular voice, stunned by her careless response to an emergency. I was pissed and Mama was too. Well, my daughter is not feeling well and we are concerned about the baby, explained Mama. She saw blood when she went to the bathroom and that's why we're worried. It's not normal for a pregnant woman to be bleeding like that. She needs to have an ultrasound. Does she have a blue and pink belts? We can't find them, my mother explained. She was becoming angry. Due to the past visits to the hospital, we were told by hospital staff that in order to have an ultrasound, a specific type of belt was needed for the monitor. However, we couldn't find those belts anywhere and thought it would be likely that they could be easily replenished by the hospital. Needless to say, we didn't expect the nurse's response. I can't do the ultrasound without those belts, said the nurse. Mama, trying her best to hold her cool, snapped back. So you're telling me that you can't give an emergency ultrasound without those two belts? I couldn't take it anymore. Just forget it, I said, completely fed up. Just hang up the phone. Walking back into my room, I couldn't believe that they would deny a pregnant woman an emergency ultrasound because of some belts that they probably had a whole stock of in the hospital. I was livid. This isn't fair, I thought, walking back into the bathroom to conduct another self-examination. This isn't right. I checked to see if the bleeding had stopped and hoped for a different outcome, but immediately saw blood again. Fearful, I told Mama and she made a few other phone calls to the doctor's office, but they all said the same thing, like a broken record. We can't do the ultrasound without those belts. Without any further medical instruction, Mama advised me to stay home, but I had missed so many days already from school and it was the day of the senior trip. If I'm not going to the doctor, then I'm going to school, I decided. I was stressed and needed to think positively. I'm just gonna go to school since it's the trip today, I told Mama. She tried to persuade me to stay home, but I wouldn't listen. I got dressed and we headed to my school. Silence. I remember it like it was yesterday. We arrived at the hospital with a red luggage bag, prepared for labor and delivery at the hospital. My hands were achy and those faithful grasshoppers leaped in my belly, an overpowering reminder of love growing inside of me. Massaging my hands together to calm my nerves, I lay back on the table and lifted my shirt to hear my daughter's heartbeat. This was my favorite part of having a prenatal checkup, hearing my unborn child's heartbeat. This is it. We'll finally get to see her, I thought. She'll be in our arms so soon. We couldn't wait to meet Nadia. The doctor squeezed a glob of blue jelly into his gloved hand, rubbed it on my stomach, and pressed the heart monitor against my skin, rotating it in a circular motion. However, as we waited a couple of minutes for the sound of a pulsating heartbeat, an overwhelming silence filled the room. Something's wrong with the monitor, explained the doctor, tapping it in his hand. Let me try a different one. I tried my best not to worry as the nurse brought in a second monitor. Silence. No heartbeat. The damage was done. That morning, I moved to the maternity ward with Nadia in my arms. As I held her for the last final moments, Mama briefly stepped out of the room, leaving me and my baby alone to bond. That's when my words came for the first time. God, take me and bring my daughter back, I said aloud. I looked around the dimly lit room. I noticed cards, a vase with pink roses, balloons, the It's a Girl sign, and I cried. I did everything right during my pregnancy. Why did God choose me to go through this? My thoughts floated around us, making the room darker. Yet there remained a glimmer of light. While Mama was outside of the room, she walked down the hallway, and there stood the nurse from the doctor's office, who refused to do the ultrasound because we had misplaced the pink and blue belts. Mama approached the nurse in the hallway with a straight face. The nurse recognized her. "Oh, I remember you," the nurse said, emotionless. "How's your daughter doing?" Mama's eyes were ice cold as she stared at her, but her voice was warm. "She's fine," replied Mama. "She had the baby." Silence filled the space between them. Mama continued, "You want to go see her?" "Yeah," replied the nurse. "Come down here," Mama said, guiding her down the hallway to the room. "I can't wait to see her," said the nurse. "She'll be glad to see you," replied Mama. When the nurse walked into the room, she was stunned. "What happened?" she asked. "The baby is stillborn," said Mama calculatedly. She looked from the nurse to me and Nadia. "She didn't make it. My daughter's really hurt. It's going to be a while before she recovers from this." The nurse looked at me holding Nadia in my arms without saying a word, but Mama had something else to say. You know what? Asked Mama, turning to the nurse. Maybe if you were a little nicer that day and would have given her those belts for the ultrasound, maybe we could have caught this in time. So maybe this is your fault. She continued, so how do you think my daughter feels right now? The nurse's eyes grew the size of 2 golf balls as she put her hands against her distraught face, cried, and ran out of the room into the hallway, knocking stuff over. But the damage had already been done. The pain had been caused, and a life had been taken. The room sat quiet. It would take many years for the raw wound to be sealed and healed. It was the worst day we had ever experienced.
I have 2 children and I have 1 grandchild. For a couple years, I worked, went to school, and took care of my kids. And it was too much for me, so eventually something had to give. So school went. Then I met a gentleman who was very charming initially. However, our relationship was problematic and he became very abusive. The first time I tried to leave him, he blacked both of my eyes and broke my nose. He did not want to use protection, and I sometimes got pregnant. So the only option to me was to have an abortion. So throughout the 18 years, I did have 5 abortions.
Honestly, prohibiting it doesn't make them not happen. And history shows us that they become less safe, but it doesn't stop people from not wanting to be pregnant.
The need for and the demand for services is always there. No matter what restrictions states put in place on abortion access, patients still need to access this care and will do what they can to access it. You know, we fight every day to make sure that people can access abortion no matter the circumstances.
I have hope because I have seen how other states have had the hard discussions, and the hard discussions have implemented change. It is our choice, it is our body, and it should not be up for political debate.
These are real people, real Kentuckians who are being impacted by this. And I think it's really important that legislators hear from Kentuckians who may not agree with these anti-abortion legislative attacks. But I really do think it's important that we not stay silent, that they hear from us if we oppose these measures.
Reproductive freedom is under threat like never before. It's going to take all of us doing our part to ensure that we can continue to make decisions about our bodies without political or governmental interference. If you are one of the dozens of sponsors or folks who have donated to this benefit, thank you so much. If you haven't, there's still time. You can visit our website, aclu-ky.org/RFP2021 donate to make a gift. Copycat abortion bans are sure to be filed when the General Assembly returns to work in Frankfort in January. Jackie and members of the Breaking Barriers Council will be there to make their voices heard and to pass the mic to others in the Commonwealth. Since the legislative possibilities around this issue are limited in Frankfort, we often have to pivot to our legal program to keep the most egregious attacks from becoming law. Our team has had great success in the federal courts and was just at the United States Supreme Court trying to fend off the latest attack from Attorney General Daniel Cameron. We can't do this critical work at this critical time without your support. Thank you for making a generous gift today. In recent weeks, you may have been asking yourself why the United States Supreme Court would allow an unconstitutional law to go into effect in Texas. In addition to what's happening in the Lone Star State, the justices are considering a case out of Mississippi this term. Officials in Mississippi are asking the court outright to overturn Roe v. Wade. For an update on what's happening nationally, as well as Kentucky's reproductive freedom docket, I'm proud to introduce my colleague, ACLU of Kentucky staff attorney, Heather Getnerick.
I'm Heather Getnerick, staff attorney with the ACLU of Kentucky.
I'm so grateful that we're able to gather together to support this work, even during these really difficult times. Abortion access has been under attack in Kentucky for years, and I'm sorry to say there's not much relief in sight. We do continue to fight multiple battles in courts, including one that brought us up to the Supreme Court just this past week. One of the incredibly talented attorneys from the National ACLU's Reproductive Freedom Project, Alexa Colby-Molinas, argued before the highest court this week in our case stemming from the D&E ban that passed out of the 2018 General Assembly. The issue before the court, though, is not about D&E abortions at all. Rather, the court is now deciding whether Attorney General Daniel Cameron should have been allowed to intervene in the case after we had already won at the district court level and at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and after his office had agreed to be bound by a final ruling from a court regarding the constitutionality of the law. This is an unusual posture for us to be in on one of our cases, but Alexa knocked it out of the park on behalf of our clients, EMW, this past week at the Supreme Court. Our other cases also remain pending. We have a challenge to the 6-week and reason bans that passed out of the 2019 General Assembly, and we have an ongoing, long-standing challenge to the state's requirement that abortion clinics have transfer and transport agreements with local hospitals and ambulance companies. Unfortunately, last year, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed our win in the transfer transport agreement case, relying on Chief Justice Roberts' concurrence from the June Medical Services case decided last year, to hold that the requirement was not necessarily an undue burden on patients' ability to access abortions. That case is now back before the district court, and we are continuing to fight from every angle to ensure that EMW is able to remain open. As all of these cases remain pending, of course, we'll make sure that our supporters are made aware of any relevant developments. And of course, everyone here is aware of the outrageous and extreme abortion ban out of Texas, which bans abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy and allows private individuals to bring claims against anyone who performs or aids and abets an abortion in violation of that law. This is an extreme and contemptible law, and unfortunately, conservative states like Kentucky are likely to try to follow suit. Additionally, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed that law to go into effect while a challenge to it was pending in the courts, which does not bode well for abortion cases before the Supreme Court at this time, including a 15-week ban out of Mississippi that the court will hear in just a couple of months. I wish we had more optimistic news to share at this event, but I remain incredibly grateful for the support and dedication of folks like yourselves who allow us to continue to do this work. We will never stop fighting as long as there are options available to us to ensure that EMW remains open and able to provide this care to Kentuckians. We are so very grateful for your allyship during these difficult times. Thank you.
The radical political climate around abortion in Kentucky hasn't stopped us from working with a bipartisan group of legislators to expand reproductive freedom. When we say reproductive freedom, we're talking about not only the legal right, but also equitable access to resources to make the best decisions for ourselves. One area of common ground is Kentucky's maternal mortality crisis. People of color are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than their white peers. The trend is even worse for Black women, regardless of income or education status. If Kentucky were its own country, it would have the 3rd highest women's incarceration rate on the planet. As Kentucky incarcerates women at such high levels, we must examine what it means to be pregnant and parenting while incarcerated in Kentucky.
I wasn't 6 months pregnant and getting high because I could stop and I just didn't want to. I understand that what I did was wrong. I understand that probably saved my baby's life. But I still feel like there's some kind of something that can be done for the pregnant mothers that are incarcerated.
I just don't view that having a dignified birthing experience is somehow special treatment. I think it's just humane treatment. Our jails were all built for men. How do you handle a female prisoner versus a male prisoner? We're incarcerating a bunch of women. They are primarily addicted, which has caused them to commit these crimes. Why are we putting them in prison? Why don't we start to talk about how do we get them into recovery?
They took me into the hospital. You've got this khaki jumpsuit and you've got shackles on, and they throw a blanket over your lap. You can hear the chain on the shackles dragging from the wheelchair. They left me shackled to the bed after they gave me my epidural for a C-section. When I got back to prison, I got all my stuff and I went back to my dorm. They called my name to the office and I had to walk all the way to the administration building. Just had a C-section 3 days ago. And walking's the very last thing you want to do after a C-section. You have to walk a good distance 3 and 4 times a day and stand in line in the cold. Regardless of what I did and the choices that I made, like, that's not okay.
The job was not complete after Dignity Won. There are still so many things that we needed to figure out relative to this population.
Postpartum care is non-existent. I mean, even something as simple as breast pads. It's non-existent. You don't have it. You've gotten a certain number of panty liners that you get to go through. And after that, that's it.
The truth is, when it comes to women, the majority of the women who go to jail are addicted to drugs. It's a disease. And so when we're trying to heal that individual from that addiction, and then you add a baby into it, you're just looking at a very different scenario. It's not black and white. It's not you committed a crime and you got to do the time. It's a gray area. The other aspect of the Dignity II bill that I think is really important is that we need to start doing data collection. How many are coming in pregnant? How many are being put into solitary confinement? How many are having babies that, you can go home after 2 days versus NICU care? What does our prenatal and postnatal care look like within that corrections facility? And just, generally, how are we treating them? But you can't make public policy better unless you have that data component.
I think maybe just that open-mindedness to, hey, it's not a choice. Today I can make a choice not to get high, but it's hard to do it when you can't stop.
We call it the Dignity Bill, and some people say dignity. Well, these people are incarcerated, and I'm like, well, yeah, they made a mistake. Some mistakes are more egregious than other mistakes. But I've never been, in my 51 years of life, I've always been forgiven for certain things. I've made amends for certain things. Incarceration is no different. Our goal is to make sure that that person not only makes amends, but then changes behavior.
I have a job. I'm trustworthy. The stability that my kids have, that means the most to me.
Even though these people have had problems, we are going to be part of the solution in being thoughtful of how we promote corrections policy in the state.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everybody for joining in today for this virtual bill signing ceremony. I'm proud to be speaking with all of you today. Members of the ACLU and Kentucky Smart on Crime Coalition work hard every day to protect the rights of our citizens and to advance policies that move our Commonwealth forward with fairness and equity as guiding principles. Today is a great day as we celebrate two new bills that recently passed the General Assembly, which I am signing into law. These measures are important reforms and improve post-incarceration outcomes. As with many criminal justice issues, these measures say as much, if not more, about who we are as people as they do about the people whose care they govern. Like you, I believe in second chances. Senate Bill 84 ensures a basic human right that expecting inmates receive the care and treatment they need. This bill puts an end to solitary confinement of these individuals. These and other provisions are necessary for the mental and the physical well-being of both a mom and a child. I want to thank lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Think about it, bipartisanship in a divided world, but they came together and worked to bring this measure and other reforms forward. These new laws are going to strengthen our criminal justice system, but also our commitment to all of our people, because those who are currently incarcerated are still our people. They're our brothers and our sisters. They're our friends. And for a well-functioning society, for a Kentucky that is going to achieve the way that I dream about it, it's going to require that we get folks not only back on track, but truly successful. And let's sign them.
There is a lot of media attention to maternal mortality in the Black community, and they're scared.
One of the things that was so striking to me about the Serena Williams situation was that she is an athlete who literally makes her living knowing her body.
They still didn't even choose to believe her, like, man.
The reality is they are wealthy and they can get the best health care, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be believed when they talk about their pain or that they're going to be taken seriously.
Can't talk about maternal mortality without having the conversation that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than their white counterparts.
Black women have always had worse health outcomes. There's a reason why we still see these health disparities that has nothing to do with the people themselves and everything to do with the system.
60% of our birth deaths are preventable.
A person's birth experience should be about more than survival.
If you look at a lot of the reports in articles and women on social media talking about their birth experience that they had a difficult time with, the common thread is that no one listened to them and that no one took their concerns seriously, and also that no one cared.
Maternal mortality can look like a bunch of different things. Often we think of the hemorrhage during childbirth, but it can be dying from an infection a week later. It could be a car accident because the seatbelt isn't properly protecting the woman.
How do we make sure that we're getting the data that we need around infant mortality and maternal morbidity and how do we make sure we put that information out publicly so that all of those different entities who are addressing this issue have shared data, shared information so that we can move forward together to really address the needs of pregnant people across Kentucky. What I think more and more people are beginning to learn and to understand is that there is a real disparity in health outcomes for Black women and white women.
This has been something that has played out in our society over centuries, that when there's racism and bigotry and segregation, that has lasting effects throughout the generations. When you look nationally, only 5% of all physicians are Black, and that doesn't match up with the patient population.
When there has been this legacy of pain and mistrust, and not just in birth, but in other areas, then there's a tendency to feel safer with the person that looks like you.
The care that women need and what they're searching for in their pregnancy and prenatal care is multifactorial. It requires multiple people to provide multiple aspects of care. I can provide medical care and support on some level, but then a doula will be able to maybe even go to their home, talk with them postpartum, spend time with them and check in with them on a more regular basis and spend more personal time with them.
A midwife was somebody on the plantation. She was the jeweled prize because unfortunately in the colonizer's eyes, without her and her knowledge, his cargo didn't get here, you know? But for the people of the plantation, that was their lifeline. Nobody else was gonna care. Nobody was gonna come help them. She was not just a birth worker. She did everything. She was honestly more of a community healer.
I had a client a while ago, maybe a year or so ago, who had endured some trauma even before birth and was even at 2 or 3 centimeters, going through a lot and screaming and really, and the doctor basically told her, it wasn't the doctor who was with her during delivery, but the doctor that she initially, saw when she was in labor. It's like, if you can't take this pain now, you're not gonna make it to 10 centimeters. Why would you think it was okay? I was working with a partner for that birth. And so my partner is white, and they knew her. This other doula would say, "Oh no, that is absolutely unacceptable, and we need a new doctor. Doctor, how dare you?" I know that there would be a good chance that if I said what she said, that I would be seen as this, belligerent, angry Black woman and may get kicked out of the birth rather than someone who really, really wanted to support my client who is in emotional and physical pain.
We in this country have not really built a system designed for health. And when you think about our healthcare system, it has not been designed for all people.
Any medical personnel, I don't care at what level, is always taught that your care that you provide to that patient is based off of their response. So I teach my clients to ask the right questions.
Once a woman or person has given birth, there's this question of, is this pain normal? Am I feeling right? Because it's a traumatic event and there can be all sorts of things happening. And I think sometimes physicians don't necessarily, may underestimate what a woman or person is telling them after they've given birth. And people may not want to say like, hey, there's this thing going on and I don't know if it's normal or not. And I think that lack of communication can really lead to some challenges.
There are actual ways that you can, evaluate a postpartum, mom and see, okay, she might need some extra help. Paid parental leave, real paid parental leave, and not like, in 2 weeks I gotta go back, contrary to what it looks like in Hollywood or whatever, like popping back out into the world after 2 weeks, isn't the best thing for your body. You grew and, released a whole person. And, it takes some time for your body to restore.
Experts believe that postpartum care should be extended. There's so many things that can go wrong and so many stressors that can happen in those first 6 weeks after their birth that we probably need to be more connected with them and have more office visits or more telephone calls with them to make sure they still feel safe and supported.
That's why I do what I do as a legislator. I'm in our state capitol in the People's House in Frankfort, Kentucky, and fighting for good access to healthcare and healthcare that's free of implicit bias or institutional and systemic racism.
Everybody has implicit bias. We all do. And it's all about how we actually recognize them ourselves and then what we do to take steps to correct it and make sure that our implicit bias isn't hurting the community that we're trying to serve.
I am able to talk to medical students and residents about this topic. So we've got the new generation of doctors coming up, having had these discussions and being knowledgeable that there is bias out there that impacts patient care.
The Maternal Care Act for Kentucky would address institutional and systemic racism in healthcare. It would provide Medicaid reimbursement for doulas, and it would also make sure that we're capturing the data that we need to make sure that every entity across Kentucky that's addressing this issue has that shared information.
If situations are better for birthing families, then the whole, community thrives and it keeps reverberating.
Mothers are the cornerstone of our society. We depend on them so much. We have to protect them at all costs. They birth life into this world. We would not be here if it were not for mothers. And so it is our duty to protect them.
American Dream. I know this was supposed to be a sermon about salvation, but I have to stand for what I believe in, even if it makes people upset. I am against critical race theory, being politically correct, socialism, the ACLU, Marxism, cancel culture, Black Lives Matter, the 1619 Curriculum Project, says pastor not too far from here. Antebellum, Sunday, July 4, 156 years later. Cut the track. Well, this is my response to all the false prophets of this patriotic nation that we call with such pride and admiration America. Do you really want to know how it feels to be Black in America? Do you really want to know? Let's get something straight. It's time to lay the cards out on the table. To address the propaganda "Make America Great Again" signifies "Make America Hate Again" and thereafter, which has always been the motive. This is not the America that it aims to be, venerated, idolized by third world nations as you've named it, sweet land of liberty, home of the free. Written in 1814 when the institution of slavery reigned supreme until 1865, that is, so for whose freedom and liberty do we really speak of? Let me drop a few lines. National Anthem, The Star-Spangled Banner, symbolical of resilience and triumph, authored by Francis Scott Key, lawyer and slave owner to place Black people in prison and Black slaves on plantations referred to as inferior. Typical sentiment, given not only the time in which it was written in, but the fact that the song remains a patriotic rendition of white immigrants, American citizens' national identity. We played this symphony, land of the free and home of the oppressed, for crowds across historic and contemporary eras, with the most paramount era, the conformist, assimilationist tradition from 1931 to forever. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. Third stanza line in the original version. As we know it, American history is white history. Does not consider the ethnic cleansing of natives, Black bodies bought and sold as commodities as we know it. Just a reminder, a few historical trinkets to put in your back pocket. Religious and political decisions, church and state shenanigans, resurrecting the duality of mind and spirit. This ain't no pathway to heaven, the way you spin the record. Force feeding and preaching condemnation and contradiction, American patriotism and Christian religion, a sermonic rant. False prophet, jackal count jesters, spitting fire and brimstone from the pulpit of salvation, prosperity, righteousness, redemption. These teachings aren't built on God love. What is American nationhood really but white supremacy, glorifying wrongdoings as truth? Missionaries speak the same language of natives with polluted scripture, pro-racist rhetoric, pro-slavery doctrine, with intention to purify their tongue, perversion, malevolent, and corrupt. I need time to digest all this coming at me that my ancestors done already went through for the next reproduction go around. All goings-ons of this nation named and declared independently by predator. Bottom line, systemic, institutional, perpetual, inherent whiteness, colonizer, patriarchal, misogynist, racist, on a spectrum of skin, flesh, human hearts where the sin begins, festering and breeding more lies, tides and offerings to the next hate scheme system, since arrival on predator, cultural genocide, color erasure. A voice somewhere advises me to excuse the crimes of the past with historical sympathy. Let's not talk about this. Let's sweep it under the rug, they say. The fact of the matter is, this ain't never been checkers, rather a conscious continuation of arrogance, narcissism, and attempt to exterminate indigenous victims and survivors. A cultural cleansing or what have you. Why so angry, agitated, divisive, defensive by the mention of race? Discuss that. Your political and religious views harbor xenophobic conceptions of citizenship and human potential. Pulling oneself up by its bootstraps, every person can have the American dream, but what if you have no boots to call your own? Impersonating pigmented vision deficiency. All strategies to distract with long, wide smiles. If you can dream it, you can believe it. That is the American dream, says false advertisement everywhere. Mockery, lies, buffoonery, coonery on billboard news media coverage for social beings, not so social meaning. A lot of shit talk influencers. Empty verbiage, negative vibrations, and sold out energy to the master plan, which is the master's plan. This problem ain't gonna resolve itself overnight. I know that. Another thing I know is I am tired. I am exhausted and overwhelmed while manifesting, materializing color blindness, complacency, convenience. I don't see color. White gaze, portraits of European sameness are a choice for the I am not ready to give up the power, immunity appended to my phenotype. Do you really want to know how it feels to be black in America? Do you really want to know? Slave Latin artifacts, all facts of the living and still dying, chains, coffles, dirt eater, mask, speculum devices, muzzle, 10-pound handmade wrought iron and brass yoke collar, with 3 tall extensions and hanging brass sleigh bells, worn by an unruly slave. Oh, you ain't never heard of that? Okay. The painful discipline slaves are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race. The verbiage of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. I figured you knew this. Nah. Oh. So now you expect me to ease your wounds that cry out to ancestors' tombstones. Unmarked in fields under gentrified homes that you own? I think not. Ease your worries for the next come-up? I think not. Ease your tearful white-splaining for the next political runner-up? I think not. It's not my job to make you feel better. It's not my job to educate you. It's not my job to wipe your tears. So accessibility, so advantageous, so whiteness, so privilege, so color blindness. Combative toxicity is purely a symmetry. No one knows injustice like you do. No one knows the song symphony of sorting out what was once history now still existing like you do. No, not like founding fathers of this new world. Structures designed, monopolized, actually manipulation to be exact. Hegel, separatism, transplantation, transatlantic slave trade, eugenics, lynchings, Tuskegee experiment, segregation and barbecues, Jim Crow, law, segregation, AFDC, welfare project, war on drugs, police shootings, mass incarceration. This is the real history. Nonetheless, this cycle circles back on repeat, reminding us in memory reflection, this ish ain't going nowhere no time soon. A whole nother pandemic we dealing with. Whether copper, clan, death by barrel, bullet, residue left for fingerprinting, but you're safe to the jungle you designed. Still no one uses nomenclature to name the institution culture, the people behind the veil. Wounds are weeping now. Who will scrub clean that spirit up? Bleach water, sweet digging in sidewalk concrete, breathless inhalation, excavation outpour left under the summer sun, drowning tears profusely. Another brother, another sister, someone's child, protection and justice for who will bind the sutures? The meat wagon is on its way, but no worries. You can go home to your family for dinner and a job well done. Never thinking of the repercussions, if only that was your daughter or son in those streets. Do you really want to know how it feels to be black in America? Do you really want to know? Here's the deal. I don't need your apologies or pacification. I need you to do the work and go deep with genuine intention. Real self-assessment evaluation, not that passive apathetic shit either. Address the discomfort. Disrupt race obsessive compulsive disorder. Rummage through the psychosis. We need reformation, restitution, resolution to defend the needs and concerns of human beings as they are valuable as the sun to the earth like yours. I've got some rituals for protection, sacrificial burnt offerings, candle prayers, and sage to ward off generational curses. first demons. You should rethink your traditions. Control is a fool's fantasy and prideful is too. Let down the false sense of entitlement. To solve the problem, for recognition, open, honest, transparent, understanding, acknowledgement, authenticity, community, patience, respect, communication, compassion, trust, no judgment. Intercultural dialogue and conversation, critical to the souls of its inhabitants, and love, real and true love. I won't accept nothing less. We got to return to the core essence of who we are, and that, I am sorry to say, is going to take some digging. It's going to take getting to the matters of the heart, the inauguration of real change, for the next generation, for the coming consequent. Build empires and legacies, relationships, rapport, too strong to tear apart, break down those cultural barriers, build up those cultural bridges to speak freely, sharing experience, perspective, worldview, theoretical framework, if you will. And if it means holding pride, ego, competitiveness, greed, power, control, lay that down. Entitlement, sacrifice, privilege, relinquish, let it go. With forward movement, the kind that moves mountains and tight grips ties, just open, just opinion, belief, experience, story, no right or wrong, no sides to choose, no this or that, just peace, no chaos, just victory, not war. No, I done said it all. Straight no chaser. Laid the cards out on the table, and the fact of the matter is, Antebellum, Sunday, July 4, 156 years later. Do you really want to know how it feels to be black in America? Do you really want to know?
Thank you for sharing this time with us. I hope you've learned more about the urgency of our reproductive freedom work at this crucial time. Thank you to our sponsors and donors who made this benefit possible. If you haven't made a gift, you can visit our website, aclu-ky.org/RFP2021 donate to make a gift today. We want you to stay up to date on all of the ACLU of Kentucky's work. You can visit our website, aclu-ky.org. At the top of the homepage, you can sign up for email alerts, and we promise not to send you more than one email per week. You can also stay up to date on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ACLU of KY. Thanks so much for joining us.